He looked at her hoodie and saw a threat. He looked at her skin and saw a criminal. But what gate agent Brad Halloway didn't see was the one thing that would cost him everything: the Federal Aviation Administration credentials in her pocket. When he called security to drag Dr. Serafina Cross out of the terminal, he thought he was protecting the flight. He was actually signing his own termination papers. This is the story of how one man's prejudice met the highest level of federal authority, and the silence that fell over the terminal when the badge finally came out. The fluorescent lights of Chicago O'Hare's Terminal 3 hummed with that specific headache-inducing frequency that only seasoned travelers seemed to notice. For Dr. Serafina Cross, it was usually white noise, the backdrop of her life for the last 15 years. But today, it sounded like a warning. Serafina adjusted the strap of her battered leather messenger bag. It was an expensive bag, Italian leather, a gift from her husband, David, for her promotion last year. But today, it looked worn, much like Serafina herself. She was dressed for comfort, not for the boardroom. She wore a charcoal grey oversized hoodie from her alma mater MIT black leggings and a pair of running shoes that had seen better days. Her hair was pulled back into a messy bun, and she wore zero makeup. To the untrained eye, she looked like a tired mother, or maybe a college student, heading home for the holidays on a budget ticket. To Brad Halloway, the senior gate agent at Gate K-12, she looked like a problem. Brad was the kind of man who wore his airline uniform like it was a military dress commanded by a 4-star general. His tie was knotted tight enough to restrict blood flow. His badge was polished and his posture was rigid. He was the gatekeeper of Flight 492 to Washington, D.C., and he took his domain very seriously. He scanned the waiting area, his eyes skipping over the businessmen in suits and the families with strollers landing squarely on Serafina. She was standing near the boarding lanes, checking her phone. She needed to be on this flight. It wasn't just a commute. She had a 9:00 a.m. meeting at the Department of Transportation headquarters that would decide the fate of a mid-sized regional carrier. "Ladies and gentlemen," Brad's voice boomed over the PA system, dripping with that sickly sweet customer service tone that barely masked his irritability. "We are about to begin pre-boarding for Flight 492 to Reagan National. We invite our first-class passengers, active military and global services members, to board at this time." Serafina slipped her phone into her pocket. She wasn't flying first class today. The government budget office frowned on that, but she held a status that superseded almost everyone else in the building. She was a senior field administrator for the FAA, specifically within the Office of Audit and Evaluation. Technically, she could commandeer a jump seat in the cockpit if she really needed to. She stepped toward the priority lane. It was a reflex. She had known crew member clearance and global services status thanks to the sheer volume of miles she flew for audits. As she approached the podium, Brad looked up. His eyes narrowed. He didn't see the tired civil servant. He saw a black woman in a hoodie trying to cut the line. "Ma'am," Brad said, his voice loud enough to turn heads. He didn't wait for her to reach the scanner. He stepped out from behind the podium, physically blocking the lane. "Zone 5 is not boarding yet. You need to step back." Serafina paused, blinking. She hadn't even scanned her boarding pass yet. "I know. I'm priority boarding." Brad let out a short, derisive scoff. He looked her up and down, making a show of inspecting her attire. "Priority. This is for global services and first class. The economy line starts back there, behind the stanchions." He pointed a manicured finger toward the back of the terminal where a mass of tired passengers stood. "I'm aware of how the lines work," Serafina said, keeping her voice calm. She reached for her digital boarding pass. "If you let me scan, you'll see I'm eligible." "I don't need to scan it to know you're in the wrong line," Brad snapped. He crossed his arms over his chest. "We have a strict dress code for first-class upgrades, and frankly, we have strict rules about line etiquette. You're holding up my paying customers." Behind Serafina, a tall man in a navy suit cleared his throat. He checked his Rolex. The pressure began to build. "Sir," Serafina said, her tone hardening slightly. "My name is Dr. Cross. I am asking you to scan my pass. I am not asking for an upgrade. I am boarding this plane." "Dr. Cross," Brad laughed. It was a nasty sound, sharp and incredulous. "Right. And I'm the Pope. Look, lady, I don't know what kind of scam you're running, trying to sneak into first class before the flight attendants catch you, but it's not happening on my watch. I handle security risks every day, and profiling tells me you're trying to pull a fast one." Profiling. The word hung in the air between them. Serafina felt the heat rise up her neck. It wasn't the first time she'd been stopped, but it was rarely this blatant. Usually it was a subtle, "Are you sure you're in the right place?" Not a physical blockade. "Did you just say profiling?" Serafina asked, her voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerous. "I said what I said," Brad retorted, his face flushing pink as he doubled down. He gestured to the man in the suit behind her. "Sir, please step forward. I apologize for the delay. This passenger is confused." He tried to reach past Serafina to take the man's ticket. Serafina didn't move. She planted her feet. "I am not confused, and you are violating Title 14 of the Code of Federal Regulations regarding passenger processing. You are denying boarding without cause." Brad's eyes bulged. He hated when passengers quoted rules. He hated it even more when they looked like her. "Cause," Brad practically spat the word. "The cause is you are being disruptive. You are blocking the flow of traffic. You are refusing to follow crew member instructions. That is a federal offense." "You are a gate agent, not flight crew," Serafina corrected him instantly. "And checking a valid ticket is not crew instructions. It's your job." "That's it." Brad slammed his hand onto the podium counter. The sound echoed through the gate area. "You're done. You're not flying today." The terminal went quiet. The chatter died down. People were watching now. Phones were coming out. "Excuse me," Serafina asked. "I said you're done," Brad yelled, playing to the crowd, now trying to look like the hero protecting the plane from a ruffian. "I'm denying you boarding for aggressive behavior and refusal to comply with security protocols. Step away from the gate, or I will have you removed." Serafina stared at him. She had a badge in her back pocket, a badge that gave her the authority to ground this entire plane if she found a safety violation. She could end this right now. But Serafina Cross was a scientist at heart. She liked to gather data. She wanted to see just how deep of a hole Brad Halloway was willing to dig. "You're denying me boarding," she repeated slowly, ensuring the cell phones recording nearby caught every word. "Because I tried to scan a priority ticket while black." "I'm denying you because you are a threat," Brad shouted. He grabbed his radio. "Security to gate K12. I have a non-compliant passenger refusing to leave the jetway entrance. Need immediate assistance." He looked at Serafina with a smug, triumphant grin. "You wanted to play big shot. Now you can explain it to the police." The air around gate K12 grew heavy, thick with the tension of a public spectacle. Serafina didn't retreat. She stood her ground, her hands visible, her posture relaxed but firm. She knew the drill. If she raised her voice, she was angry. If she moved her hands too fast, she was a threat. She had to be a statue of calm while Brad unraveled. But Brad wasn't working alone. The court of public opinion was in session, and the jury was rigged. A woman with a bleached blonde bob and a Louis Vuitton tote bag that looked suspiciously stiff, likely a knockoff, stepped out of the line behind the businessman. She looked like she had been waiting her whole life for a moment to insert herself into a conflict. This was Marilyn Gable. "Oh, for heaven's sake," Marilyn huffed, pushing her sunglasses up onto her head. "Just do what he says." "We are all trying to get to DC. Some of us have actual jobs to get to." Serafina shifted her gaze to Marilyn. "I have a job too, ma'am." "Doing what harassing innocent workers," Marilyn scoffed, turning to Brad with a sympathetic, conspiratorial smile. "I saw the whole thing, officer or agent. She pushed right in front of this gentleman. It was aggressive, very scary." Brad puffed up, emboldened by the backup. "Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate you bearing witness. It's hard to keep everyone safe when you have people who think the rules don't apply to them." "Exactly." Marilyn continued, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. "It's always the same with these types of people. You give them an inch, they take a mile. Honey." She looked at Serafina with mock pity. "Economy is that way. Just accept it. You're embarrassing yourself." Serafina felt a muscle in her jaw twitch. "These types of people, entitled people," Marilyn said quickly, realizing she might have stepped too close to the line. "People who think a hoodie means they can bully a man in uniform." "He's wearing a polyester blend vest, not a badge," Serafina said dryly. "He is an authority figure," Marilyn shrieked. "And you are nobody. Get out of the way." "Security is 5 minutes out," Brad announced loudly, checking his watch, as if he were coordinating a special ops mission. He looked at Serafina. "Last chance. Walk away, and maybe I don't press charges for interference with a flight crew. Stay, and you're going to jail." The businessman in the suit, who had been silent until now, finally spoke up. He looked uncomfortable. "Look, man," he said to Brad. "She just asked to scan her ticket. Maybe just scan it. If it rejects, she walks. If it works, we board. This seems excessive." Brad whipped his head around, betrayed. "Sir, do not interfere. She has already demonstrated hostility. If I let her on this plane, and she snaps at 30,000 feet, that's on me. I am the first line of defense here." "She hasn't raised her voice once," the businessman muttered, stepping back, not wanting to be the next target of Brad's power trip. "That's how they do it," Brad whispered loudly to Marilyn. "Calculated. Cold. It's a sign of a sociopathic tendency. I learned that in de-escalation training." Serafina almost laughed. Brad Halloway had clearly failed de-escalation training. She pulled her phone out again. "Put the phone away," Brad shouted, pointing a finger in her face. "No recording. That is a violation of airline policy." "I'm not recording," Serafina said calmly. "I'm sending a text." She was texting David. Going to be late. "Situation at O'Hare. Might need you to call Jim Henderson if this goes south." Jim Henderson was the regional director of the FAA for the Great Lakes region. He was also Serafina's golf partner on Sundays. "I said, put it away." Brad lunged forward, actually reaching over the podium to snatch at her device. Serafina pulled her hand back reflexively. "Do not touch me!" "Assault!" Marilyn screamed from the sidelines. "She just tried to hit him. Did you see that?" She swung at him. The gasps from the gate area were audible. From the back, where people couldn't see clearly, it probably looked like a scuffle. The narrative was being written in real-time, violent passenger attacks. Hero gate agent. 2 large men in yellow airport security vests came jogging down the concourse, followed by a Chicago police officer. Brad straightened his tie. a look of pure malicious satisfaction settling over his face. "Here we go," he sneered at Serafina. "Showtime is over." The police officer, a burly man named Officer Taggart, with a weary expression, pushed through the crowd. All right, break it up. What's the problem here?" Brad immediately stepped out from behind the podium, hands raised in a gesture of innocence. "Officer, thank God you're here. This woman," he pointed an accusing finger at Serafina, "attempted to breach the security barrier. When I refused her entry due to invalid credentials, she became belligerent. She refused to leave the secure area, incited a disturbance, and just now she attempted to strike me when I tried to secure the boarding equipment." Officer Taggart looked at Serafina. He saw the hoodie. He saw the defiant stance. He saw the crying woman. Marilyn was now faking distress nearby. Then he looked at Brad. "She tried to hit you. Swung right at my face." Brad lied smoothly. "I have a witness. Mrs. Gable." Marilyn stepped forward, hand on her chest. "It was awful, officer. He was just doing his job, asking her to check her bag, and she just snapped. She was screaming about how she owns the airport or something. Just totally unstable." Officer Taggart sighed. He turned to Serafina, his hand resting near his belt, not on his gun, but on his handcuffs. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to turn around and place your hands behind your back. You are under arrest for disturbing the peace and assault." Serafina didn't flinch. She looked Taggart in the eye. "Officer, before you do that, I suggest you ask Mr. Halloway to pull the CCTV footage from the camera directly above his head. It will show I never touched him. It will also show he refused to scan a valid ticket." "We can discuss the tapes at the station," Taggart said, stepping into her personal space. "Right now, you're causing a scene. Turn around." "I'm not going to the station," Serafina said. Her voice changed. It wasn't the voice of a passenger anymore. It was the voice of a woman who commanded rooms full of pilots and engineers. "And you aren't arresting me. Resisting arrest will only add to the charges," Taggart warned, reaching for her arm. "I'm not resisting," Serafina said. "I'm identifying myself." Slowly, with 2 fingers, she reached into the back pocket of her jeans. "Gun!" Brad shrieked, diving behind the podium. The crowd screamed. Taggart flinched, drawing his taser. But Serafina didn't pull out a weapon. She pulled out a leather wallet, flipped it open, and held it high. The gold badge inside caught the fluorescent light, gleaming with an authority that silenced the room instantly. Below the eagle crest, the bold blue letters read, "Federal Aviation Administration, Office of the Inspector General." "I am Dr. Serafina Cross," she announced, her voice ringing clear like a bell through the sudden silence. "Senior Auditor Badge Number 004-92. I am here to conduct a surprise operational audit of Flight 492 and the gate procedures of this airline. And officer," she looked at Taggart, who was staring at the badge, his taser slowly lowering, "I believe you are about to arrest a federal agent for trying to do her job." Brad peeked up from behind the podium. His face, previously flushed with anger, had drained of all color. It was a pale, sickly gray. Serafina turned her gaze to him. She didn't shout. She didn't scream. She simply smiled, a cold, razor-sharp smile. "Now, Mr. Halloway," she said softly, "about that dress code." The silence that followed Serafina's declaration was absolute. It was the kind of heavy, suffocating quiet usually reserved for the aftermath of a car crash. The hum of the terminal ventilation system seemed to roar in the vacuum, left by Brad's shouting. Officer Taggart was the first to move. He didn't just holster his taser, he practically banished it from existence. His posture shifted from subduing a suspect to standing at attention in a nanosecond. He knew what that badge meant. He knew that the office of the Inspector General didn't hand out credentials to random people in hoodies. They were the internal affairs of the sky. They investigated plane crashes, regulatory failures, and as of 30 seconds ago, gate agents who abused their power. "Dr. Cross," Taggart said, his voice respectful, almost apologetic. I need to verify the credential. Standard procedure." "Of course, officer," Serafina said, handing him the leather wallet. She didn't look at him, though. Her dark eyes were locked on Brad Halloway. Brad was trembling. It started in his hands, which were gripping the podium, as if it were the only thing keeping him upright, and spread to his knees. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out, just a dry, clicking rasp. Taggart examined the badge, checked the holographic watermark, and handed it back with 2 hands. "It's genuine. My apologies, ma'am. We were given conflicting information regarding the situation." "You were lied to," Serafina corrected, tucking the badge away. "There is a difference." She finally moved toward the podium. The crowd parted for her like the Red Sea. The passengers who had been rolling their eyes at her moments ago were now staring with a mixture of awe and terror. They realized they had almost jeered a woman who held the power to ground the entire fleet. Serafina stopped directly in front of the counter. She was eye level with Brad now. "Mr. Halloway," she said. Her voice was terrifyingly calm. "I believe I have a flight to catch, and you have a job to do. Scan the boarding pass." Brad stared at her. His brain was misfiring. If he scanned the pass, he was admitting he was wrong. If he didn't scan the pass, he was obstructing a federal investigation. It might be too late," Brad stammered, checking the screen. "The manifest, the door closure time." "The door closes when I say it closes," Serafina said. "I am the reason this flight is designated for an operational audit. The pilots are expecting me. The only person delaying this flight is you." She held her phone out again, the QR code bright on the screen. With a shaking hand, Brad picked up the scanner. He aimed it at the phone. It beeped a cheerful green light accompanying the sound. "Priority access, 1A, Global Services." The screen flashed the passenger details, not just a seat number, but the notes attached to her profile notes Brad had ignored because he hadn't bothered to look up her name. "Do not downgrade. FAA official. VIP handling required." Brad looked at the screen, then at Serafina. He looked like he wanted to vomit. "Thank you," Serafina said. She didn't walk down the jet bridge, though. She turned around to face the terminal. Marilyn Gable was trying to make herself invisible. She had grabbed her fake Louis Vuitton bag and was attempting to merge into the line of economy passengers using a tall man as a human shield. "Mrs. Gable," Serafina called out. Marilyn froze. She turned around slowly, a fake brittle smile plastered on her face. "Me." "Oh, I was just heading to my seat." "Misunderstanding. Big misunderstanding. We're all tired, right? You wanted to enforce the rules," Serafina said, walking toward her. "You were very passionate about disruptive passenger protocols. You gave a witness statement to a police officer claiming I assaulted this man. Well, from my angle it looked like..." Marilyn started to backpedal, sweat beading on her upper lip. "Making a false statement to law enforcement regarding an aviation security incident is a felony, Mrs. Gable," Serafina informed her. "It falls under the same jurisdiction as making a bomb threat. You attempted to have a federal agent arrested to expedite your own boarding." Marilyn's jaw dropped. "I didn't know who you were. You were wearing a hoodie." "Does the law change based on my wardrobe?" Serafina asked. "Does truth depend on cotton blends?" She turned to Officer Taggart. "Officer, I'd like to file a formal complaint against Mrs. Gable for filing a false report and interfering with the duties of a federal officer. Please detain her for questioning. I want her statement on record before she boards any aircraft." "Wait!" "No," Marilyn screeched as Taggart stepped toward her. "I have a vacation." "You can't do this. Brad, tell them." She looked to Brad for help, but Brad was busy staring at his shoes, praying for the floor to open up and swallow him whole. "I'm sorry, ma'am," Taggart said, taking Marilyn by the elbow. "You're not flying today. We need to have a chat." As Marilyn was led away, protesting and crying real tears now, Serafina turned back to the gate agent. The show wasn't over. "Mr. Halloway," she said, "I'm going to board now. While I am doing my pre-flight inspection of the cockpit, I want you to call your station manager. Tell him Serafina Cross is here. Tell him I have initiated a Code Red audit of this gate's operations." "Code Red," Brad whispered. He had never heard of a Code Red. "It means," Serafina said, leaning in close, "that nothing leaves this gate until I review every single decision you've made in the last 4 hours. Make the call." She turned and walked down the jet bridge, the sound of her sneakers squeaking on the linoleum, the only sound in the terminal. The cockpit of the Boeing 737 was a sanctuary of switches, dials, and professionalism, a stark contrast to the circus at the gate. Captain David Miller, a 20-year veteran with salt and pepper hair and a demeanor as steady as a rocky mountain, looked up as Serafina entered. "Dr. Cross?" Miller smiled, extending a hand. "Dispatch told us we had a ride-along today. Good to see you again. How's David?" "He's good, Captain," Serafina said, shaking his hand. She dropped her bag in the corner. "Though he's going to be worried when I tell him why we're running late." Captain Miller frowned, checking the flight computer. "We are running late. The gate agent hasn't sent the final weight and balance numbers yet. Is there an issue topside?" "You could say that," Serafina said, sitting in the jump seat and buckling the harness. "Your lead gate agent, Brad, tried to have me arrested." Captain Miller paused. He slowly turned in his seat. First Officer Sarah Jenkins, who was programming the FMC, stopped typing and spun around. "He did what?" Jenkins asked. "He didn't like my hoodie," Serafina said dryly, "and he accused me of being a security threat. I had to pull the badge to get past the podium." Miller's face darkened. "Brad Halloway, the guy with the Napoleon complex. I've had 3 flight attendants complain about him this month. He wouldn't let one of them board because her scarf was tied incorrectly. He delayed the flight 10 minutes to make her fix it." "Well," Serafina said, pulling out her iPad and opening the official FAA audit software. "He's about to delay this one a lot longer. I've summoned the station manager." "Good," Miller grunted. "I'll keep the engines off. Burn the APU. We aren't going anywhere until you're satisfied." 10 minutes later, the sound of heavy, hurried footsteps echoed up the jet bridge. A man in a tailored suit, looking like he had just run a marathon in dress shoes, burst into the aircraft. He was sweating profusely. This was Gavin Roach, the O'Hare station manager for the airline. He managed over 300 employees, but right now he looked like a schoolboy called to the principal's office. "Dr. Cross," Gavin panted, stopping at the cockpit door. I am so incredibly sorry. I just got the call from security. I ran all the way from Terminal 1. Serafina unbuckled and stood up. She stepped out of the cockpit into the small galley area, blocking Gavin from entering the flight deck. "Mr. Roach," she said, "we have a problem." I know. Gavin wiped his forehead with a handkerchief. "Brad told me there was a misunderstanding with credentials. I can assure you we take respect for the FAA very seriously." "It wasn't a misunderstanding," Serafina said, her voice cutting through his corporate speak. "It was profiling, and it was an abuse of authority. But that's the HR problem. I'm interested in the regulatory problem." Gavin froze. "Regulatory problem?" "Brad Halloway claimed he was denying me boarding based on a security assessment," Serafina explained. "He called airport police. He stated I was a threat. Under FAA regulations, if a gate agent identifies a security threat, they are required to lock down the jetway and halt all boarding immediately until the threat is neutralized. Brad didn't do that. He kept boarding first-class passengers while I was allegedly threatening him." She tapped her iPad. "So either he lied to the police about the threat, which is a crime, or he failed to follow mandatory lockdown procedures for an active security threat, which is a gross negligence violation that carries a fine of $25,000 per passenger, currently on this plane." Gavin's eyes went wide. He did the math instantly. 160 passengers, millions of dollars in fines. He didn't stop boarding, Gavin whispered. "No," Serafina said. "He prioritized getting the first-class cabin seated while escalating a conflict with a passenger he deemed dangerous. That tells me his security concern was a fabrication. And if he fabricates security threats, Mr. Roach, what else is he fabricating?" I don't know," Gavin stammered. "I do," Serafina said. "I just pulled the gate logs." This was the twist. While sitting in the jump seat, Serafina had used her credentials to access the back end of the airline's reservation system. "Flight 492 is full," Serafina said. "Oversold by 3 seats. Standard practice. But I noticed something interesting about seat 3A. 3A, Gavin asked. "That's a first-class seat." "It is." Serafina nodded. "It's currently blocked. The system says blocked for crew rest. But this is a 2-hour flight. There is no crew rest requirement. And there are no deadheading pilots on the manifest besides me." She turned the iPad so Gavin could see the screen. "Who is T. Halloway?" Serafina asked. Gavin looked at the screen. His face went from pale to a deep, angry red. That's his brother. Trevor." "Ah," Serafina said. "So Brad Halloway blocked a revenue first-class seat, falsely labeled it as mandatory crew rest to prevent the system from giving it to a paying upgrade, and was planning to slide his brother into it at the last second, non-revenue fraud." Gavin looked like he was going to pass out. He told me the seat was broken, taking it out of inventory." "It's not broken," Serafina said. "I checked it myself when I walked on. Recline works, tray table works." He was saving it, Gavin muttered, the realization sinking in. He was trying to get his brother a free first-class ride to DC. "And I," Serafina pointed to herself, "was the snag. I was a priority boarder. If I boarded and the flight was full, the system might have forced him to release that seat if he hadn't coded it correctly yet. Or maybe he just didn't want a shabby-looking woman sitting next to his brother. Either way, he manufactured a security crisis to keep me off the plane so he could steal a seat." The gravity of the situation hit the floor. This wasn't just a rude employee. This was federal fraud, wire fraud, and a violation of the airline's carrier agreement. "Bring him down here," Gavin said. His voice was no longer frightened. It was lethal. "I think you should," Serafina agreed. Gavin grabbed his radio. "Halloway, get down to the aircraft, now." "Copy, boss." Brad's voice came over the radio, sounding shaky but hopeful. He probably thought Gavin was there to smooth things over, to tell the mean lady to calm down. When Brad walked onto the plane, he smiled nervously. He saw Gavin and Serafina standing in the galley. "Hey, Gavin," Brad said, trying to sound casual. "Look, I know this looks bad, but she really was being aggressive, and I just thought better safe than sorry, right? I mean security first." Gavin didn't speak. He stepped to the side, revealing the iPad in Serafina's hand. "Mr. Halloway," Serafina said, "we aren't discussing my behavior. We are discussing Seat 3A. Brad's face disintegrated. The confident mask fell away, revealing the panicked child underneath. I don't know what you mean. Your brother Trevor is listed as the occupant for the seat you marked as broken/crew rest." Serafina said, "I assume Trevor is in the terminal waiting for the last-minute boarding pass." Brad couldn't breathe. He looked at Gavin. "Boss, I can explain. It was his birthday, and I just wanted—" "You called the police," Gavin said, his voice trembling with rage. "You called the police on a federal inspector general to cover up a seat theft." "I didn't know she was a Fed," Brad shouted. "She looked like nobody." "And that," Serafina said softly, "is exactly why you're finished." "Bradwell," Gavin said, unclipping his own security badge to use the access key. "Give me your badge, and your vest, and your login token." "What, Gavin? Come on. I've been here 6 years. Brad pleaded, tears welling up. "You can't fire me right here. I have union rights. I need a rep." "You committed fraud," Gavin snapped. "And you falsified a federal security report. The union won't touch you. You're not just fired, Brad. I'm pressing charges for theft of services." "Hand it over," Serafina added. "Or I can call Officer Taggart back down here. I'm sure he'd love to add fraud to the report he's currently writing about Mrs. Gable." Slowly, painfully, Brad Halloway unzipped his polyester airline vest. He unclipped his badge, the badge he used to bully grandmothers and harass travelers. He placed them in Gavin's hand. He stood there in his white dress shirt, looking small and defeated. "Get off my plane," Captain Miller called out from the cockpit, "and take your brother with you." Brad turned and walked up the jet bridge. He wasn't marching like a general anymore. He was shuffling like a prisoner. Serafina watched him go. She felt the heavy weight of the justice she had just dispensed. It was satisfying, yes, but also exhausting. "Mr. Roach," Serafina said to the station manager, "I still need to complete my audit. I need to know how he was able to manipulate the seat inventory without a manager override. That suggests a flaw in your software permissions." Gavin nodded vigorously. "Anything you need, Dr. Cross. We will open the books. Total transparency." "Good," Serafina said. She turned to the first-class cabin. The passengers in the front rows had heard everything. They were staring at her with wide eyes. She walked to seat 1, placed her bag in the overhead bin, and sat down. She pulled out her Kindle and her noise-cancelling headphones. "We can push back now, Captain," she called out. As the plane taxied, Serafina looked out the window. She saw Brad Halloway standing in the terminal window, his head in his hands. Beside him stood a man who looked just like him, Trevor, who was throwing his hands up in anger, presumably yelling at Brad for ruining his free trip. Karma, Serafina thought, wasn't just a boomerang. Sometimes it was a 737, The flight to Reagan National was smooth, a stark contrast to the turbulence on the ground. Serafina spent the hour and a half compiling her initial report on her iPad. She documented the timeline, the denial of boarding, the refusal to inspect credentials, the false police report, and the fraudulent blocking of Seat 3A. When the wheels of the 737 touched down on the tarmac in D.C., Serafina closed her iPad and turned on her phone. It vibrated. Then it vibrated again. Then it began to buzz continuously. A relentless stream of notifications that nearly shook the device out of her hand. Texts from colleagues, emails from the press office, and a frantic message from her husband, David. David. Honey. Are you okay? You're trending on Twitter. Who is Brad? Serafina frowned. She opened the Twitter app. Now, X. The #1 trending topic in the United States was hashtag badge drop. The #2 topic was hashtag firebrad. She clicked the hashtag. The top post was a video uploaded by a user named @Jackson_live, a Gen Z travel vlogger with 4 million followers who, unbeknownst to Serafina, had been standing 3 people behind Marilyn Gable in the line. The caption read, "Gate agent tries to profile a queen and gets absolutely destroyed by the feds. Watch until the end for the silence. Hashtag justice. Hashtag FAA. Hashtag O'Hare Serafina watched the video. It was high definition, steady, and captured everything. It showed Brad sneering, "I don't need to scan it to know you're in the wrong line." It showed Marilyn screeching, "She swung at him," when Serafina had barely moved. It showed the arrival of the police, and then the climax. The camera zoomed in perfectly as Serafina raised the gold badge. The audio was crisp. "I am Dr. Serafina Cross. I believe you are about to arrest a federal agent for trying to do her job." The video had been posted 2 hours ago. It already had 14 million views. As the plane taxied to the gate, Serafina scrolled through the comments. The court of public opinion had convened, and the verdict was unanimous. User 882. The way his face dropped. I need that framed in a museum. That is the purest definition of FAFOF, around, and find out, Flygirl, 99. I'm a flight attendant for Summit Air. This guy Brad is a nightmare. He once wrote me up for smiling too much. Glad he's finally done. Legal Eagle. Did that lady in the blonde bob just lie to a cop? That's filing a false report. Hope she likes prison food. Internet detective found her. The blonde woman is Marilyn Gable. She's a luxury real estate agent for Gable and Associates in Schaumburg, Illinois. Her business page is already getting review bombed. R.I.P. her career. Serafina sighed, slipping the phone back into her pocket. She hadn't asked for fame, but she wouldn't shy away from the results. Transparency was the core of her job. She deplaned last, thanking Captain Miller. As she walked into the terminal at Reagan National, she saw a man in a dark suit waiting for her at the gate. It wasn't a driver. It was Marcus Nathan, the Vice President of Government Affairs for Summit Air. "Dr. Cross," Nathan said, looking like a man who was walking to his own execution. "The CEO, Mr. Richard Nathan, sent me personally. We saw the video." "I imagined you might have," Serafina said, walking past him without breaking stride. "Mr. Nathan, if you're here to apologize, save it for the press release. I have a meeting at the DOT in 45 minutes, and your airline is the main topic of conversation." "We want to cooperate," Nathan said, rushing to keep up with her fast pace. We've already issued a statement placing Mr. Halloway on indefinite unpaid suspension pending investigation. He's not suspended, Marcus, Serafina corrected him sharply. He was terminated for cause by your station manager 2 hours ago for wire fraud and theft of services. Or didn't Mr. Roach tell you about the broken seat and Brad's brother? Marcus Nathan stopped dead in the middle of the concourse. Fraud. His brother. Serafina stopped and turned back. You didn't know Brad Halloway blocked a revenue first-class seat to give a free ride to his brother Trevor. He created a security incident to distract from the fact that he was manipulating inventory. Your internal controls are a mess, Marcus. I suggest you get back to your office and start reading the audit logs before the FAA fines you into bankruptcy. She turned and walked away, leaving the vice president of the airline standing stunned in the middle of the baggage claim. The video hadn't just exposed a racist gate agent. It had pulled the thread on a sweater that was about to unravel the entire management structure of Summit Air's O'Hare operations. The next morning, the conference room at the Department of Transportation headquarters overlooking the Navy Yard was filled with attention so thick it felt physical. At the head of the table sat Administrator Clyburn, the head of the FAA. To his right was Serafina Cross, looking fresh and sharp in a navy blazer, her hoodie incident a distant memory. On the other side of the table sat the executive team of Summit Air CEO, Richard Nathan, his VP Marcus, and their general counsel. They looked exhausted. Their stock price had dropped 12% since the market opened, wiping out nearly $500 million in value. The video, Administrator Clyburn began, his voice gravelly, was disturbing. But Dr. Cross's report is damning. He slid a thick file across the polished mahogany table. Mr. Nathan, Clyburn continued, your agent, Mr. Halloway, didn't just profile one of my senior auditors. He exposed a loophole in your reservation system that allowed gate agents to ghost seats for friends and family. Dr. Cross's audit last night found that Mr. Halloway has done this 14 times in the last year. That is 14 stolen first-class fares. That is federal wire fraud. Richard Nathan, a man usually known for his composure, rubbed his temples. We had no idea, Administrator. Halloway was a senior agent. He had override codes. He had unchecked power, Serafina interjected calmly, and he used it to terrorize passengers. We pulled the complaints file, Richard. There were 42 separate complaints against Brad Halloway in 3 years. Rude, aggressive, discriminatory. Your HR department marked every single one of them as resolved. Customer coaching. You ignored the smoke, and now the house is on fire. We are firing the regional HR director effective immediately, Richard said quickly, and we are fully cooperating with the DOJ regarding Mr. Halloway. Good, Serafina said, because the Department of Justice picked him up this morning. It was true. The hard karma hadn't waited. At 6 a.m. that morning, while Brad Halloway was sitting in his apartment in Chicago, furiously deleting his Facebook posts and trying to blame woke culture for his firing on an anonymous forum, there was a heavy knock at his door. It wasn't the local police this time. It was the FBI. Theft of airline services across state lines when committed by an airline employee using secure computer systems is a federal felony. Combined with making a false report to law enforcement about a security threat, Serafina Brad was looking at a laundry list of charges. The news footage of Brad being led out of his apartment complex in handcuffs, wearing the same sweatpants he had planned to wear on his vacation, was already playing on CNN in the corner of the conference room. He didn't look arrogant anymore. He looked small, pale, and terrified. And what of Mrs. Gable? The general counsel asked, trying to shift the focus. The passenger who filed the false witness statement? That's a matter for the Illinois state attorney, Serafina said. "But I hear her karma arrived via email." Karma for Marilyn Gable had come swift and brutal. Marilyn had been a top producer for a high-end real estate brokerage. Her entire brand was built on trust, class, and integrity. When the video went viral, her brokerage didn't just get emails. They received calls from their biggest clients, developers, investors, wealthy families, threatening to pull their listings if she remained associated with the firm. No one wanted a woman who lied to the police selling their multi-million-dollar homes. At 9:00 a.m., just as the meeting at the DOT was starting, Marilyn Gable was called into her broker's office. She wasn't just fired, she was publicly disavowed. The brokerage posted a statement on their Instagram. "Gable and Associates has zero tolerance for dishonesty or discrimination. Effective immediately. Marilyn Gable is no longer licensed with our firm. We apologize to Dr. Cross and the community for the behavior displayed by our former associate." Marilyn, who had been screaming about Serafina's dress code 24 hours ago, was now unemployable in her industry. She was currently sitting in a lawyer's office trying to figure out how to pay a retainer when her bank accounts had been frozen due to a civil lawsuit filed by the passenger she had used as a human shield, who was suing her for emotional distress and defamation by association. Back in the conference room, Serafina closed her folder. "Gentlemen," she said to the airline executives, "Brad Halloway and Marilyn Gable are individuals. They made their choices, but Summit Air created the environment where Brad felt comfortable acting like a dictator. He thought he was untouchable because you let him be untouchable." "We will change," Richard Nathan promised, his voice desperate. "Mandatory retraining, new software protocols, independent oversight." "You will," Serafina agreed, "because I'm assigning a permanent audit team to your O'Hare hub for the next 6 months. Every denied boarding, every blocked seat, every interaction will be monitored. You are on probation." She stood up. The meeting was over. "One more thing," Serafina said, pausing at the door. "My return flight is tomorrow evening. I'll be flying economy. I trust there won't be any issues with the line." "Dr. Cross," Richard Nathan said, standing up out of respect. "If you fly Summit Air, you will be treated with the dignity every passenger deserves. We'll make sure of it." "See that you do," Serafina said, "because next time I won't just hold the plane. I'll ground the fleet." As she walked out of the DOT building, stepping into the crisp DC air, Serafina took a deep breath. She checked her phone one last time. A text from David. "Just saw the news about Brad getting arrested by the FBI. And Marilyn got fired. Remind me never to cut in front of you in the kitchen." Serafina smiled. She typed back, "I didn't do it, honey. They did it to themselves. I just turned on the lights." She hailed a cab. She had a lot of work to do, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like the system had actually worked. The terminal was silent. The badge had spoken, and the karma had landed with the weight of a heavy jet. 3 months later, the Dirksen Federal Building in downtown Chicago was gray and imposing against the winter sky. Inside courtroom 12B, the atmosphere was solemn. Brad Halloway stood before the bench. The arrogance that had defined him at Gate K-12 was completely gone. He was wearing an ill-fitting orange jumpsuit provided by the Metropolitan Correctional Center. His hair was unkempt, his face gaunt. He looked like a man who had spent the last 90 days realizing that the internet does not forgive and the federal government does not forget. The charge was wire fraud and theft of honest services. The plea was guilty. Judge Marcus Thorne, a man known for his disdain for white-collar crime, looked down at Brad over his spectacles. "Mr. Holloway," Judge Thorne said, his voice echoing in the wood-paneled room, "you treated a commercial airline gate like your personal fiefdom. You discriminated against passengers based on appearance. You fabricated security threats to cover up your own petty theft, and you wasted the valuable time of federal law enforcement officers." Brad kept his head down. "I'm sorry, Your Honor. I just got carried away. It was a stressful job." "Stress does not excuse fraud," Judge Thorne retorted sharply. "You didn't just steal a seat for your brother. You attempted to destroy the reputation and liberty of Dr. Serafina Cross to hide your crime. If she had been anyone else, anyone without that badge, she might be the one standing here today facing assault charges because of your lies." The judge banged his gavel once, a sound of finality. "Brad Holloway, I sentence you to 24 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. You are also permanently banned from employment in the aviation security sector. Marshals, take him away." As Brad was handcuffed and led out, he looked back into the gallery. He saw his brother Trevor, who refused to make eye contact. He saw his former boss, Gavin Roach, who looked relieved. And in the back row, he saw Serafina Cross. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't gloating. She was simply watching, bearing witness to the end of the process she had started. She nodded once, a silent acknowledgement that the balance had been restored, and then she stood up and walked out. Outside the courtroom, Marilyn Gable was sitting on a bench waiting for her own hearing in the state court down the hall. She looked unrecognizable. The blonde bob was grown out and messy, the designer clothes replaced by a nondescript sweater. She had lost her job, her reputation, and most of her friends. She was facing community service and a permanent criminal record for filing a false police report when she saw Serafina walk by. Marilyn shrank into herself, pulling her coat tight, terrified that the woman in the hoodie might have more karma to dispense. But Serafina didn't even look at her. Marilyn was no longer a threat. She was a cautionary tale. Serafina walked out of the courthouse and hailed a cab to O'Hare. She had a flight to catch. When she arrived at Terminal 3, the atmosphere was different. The tension that used to hang over the boarding lanes was gone. The staff seemed more attentive, more careful. She approached Gate K-12. There was a new agent there, a young woman named Elena. A passenger, a young man in tattered jeans and a heavy backpack, was struggling with the scanner. He looked nervous, expecting to be yelled at. "I'm sorry it's not working," the young man stammered. "Take your time," Elena said with a warm, genuine smile. "Let me help you with that. We'll get you on board." Serafina watched from a distance, her hand brushing the leather of her messenger bag where her badge sat. She didn't need to take it out today. She didn't need to be the hammer. The lesson had been learned. She scanned her own ticket priority access and walked down the jet bridge. As she boarded, she texted David one final update. "Done. Brad got 2 years. The airport is quiet. Coming home." She took her seat in one, looked out the window at the busy tarmac, and finally, for the first time in months, Serafina Cross closed her eyes and slept the silence of the terminal her lullaby. Brad Holloway thought he had all the power because he had a microphone and a uniform. He learned the hard way that true power doesn't need to shout. It just needs to show its credentials. Dr. Cross proved that when you judge someone by their cover, you might just get crushed by the book. What do you think? Did Brad deserve the 2 years in prison, or was losing his job enough? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of ultimate Karen karma and justice served cold, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story about the moment regret sets in. Thanks for watching, and remember, be kind, because you never know who you're talking to.